And welcome to this council meeting for Monday the 29th of August. Present Alderman Zuko, Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Thomas, Councillor Dutta, Alderman Varakis, Councillor Sherlock and Councillor Coates, and we have an apologies from the Lord Mayor, Alderman Sexton and Alderman Fox, and as a result of that apology from Alderman Fox, and I know that we've had quite a number of texts in relation to this evening, because Alderman Councillor Fox won't be here, item 11 will be deferred. Firstly, I'd like to advise that all present that audio and video of this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the community via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. For the purposes of the recording, elected members should wait for the chairman to announce them before speaking. And if you could turn your mobile devices to either silent or if you can turn them off. Thank you very much. Now, in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built. I acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania La Truita, who have survived invasion and dispossession and who continue to maintain and strengthen their identity, culture and rights. I recognise the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice and pay my respects to elders past and present and to any First Nations people listening today. Item 1 is confirmation of minutes. Alderman Varakis, do I have a seconder? Councillor Sherlock. Any discussion on those minutes? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Transfer of agenda items. Any transfers? There's no communication from the chair. There's notification of council workshops, and we've had a workshop on the 15th of August to discuss the CEO's KPIs. Did we just have a workshop as well? and this evening's workshop as well. So in each case there were 9 elected members at the 15th of August, and I believe 7 or 8 of us at this one that we've just had. Item 5 is public question time. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, we do have a number of questions this evening. The first question comes from Ms Sophie Underwood. Thank you.
Ms Underwood, would you like to read your question? Thank you.
Thank you. Is this that on? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Sophie Underwood. I'm the State Coordinator of the Planning Matters Alliance, which is an alliance of community groups, almost 70 groups from around the state. And we've got a question in regards to a motion that was put to the Local Government Association. So in March 2021, the Local Government Association of Tasmania rejected a motion seeking to investigate removing councils as a planning authority and have councils replaced by independent expert panels. The Hobart City Council voted against the motion. Can you please explain the Hobart City Council's position of remaining as a planning authority? And just to bring your attention to the fact that the motion was lost, 16 for, 39 against, and 2 abstained. And so what that shows is that there's a solid majority of councils who want to retain planning in their local, in their local area, supporting local issues for local people. Thank you.
Ms Underwood, thank you very much for your question. Support or otherwise for the Burnie City Council's motion was a policy decision for the council, which officers first presented to the City Planning Committee for consideration at its meeting on the 1st of March 2022. The City Planning Committee resolved to recommend to the Council not to support Burnie City Council's motion at the Local Government Association of Tasmania General Meeting held on the 12th of March 2021. This is, that is investigating removing councils as planning authorities and having council replaced by independent expert panels. At its meeting of the 9th of March 2021, the Council on a vote supported the committee's recommendation. It should be noted the vote at both committee and council was split, with the reasons to vote one way or the other being those of each individual elected member and did not form part of the council's formal position on the matter. So thank you for your question, and a copy of this response will be provided to you in writing and will include a link to the relevant reports. Thank you. Our next question.
Thank you, Chair. The next question is from Mr. Edwin Johnston, who is in the gallery with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions from concerned ratepayers in Battery Point. My first one's about Kelly Steps. The lighting above Kelly Steps is no longer adequate and lately has not been working at all. The steps are a historic part of Hobart, regularly used by tourists and by locals as a backdrop for photos. These steps are rarely cleaned and now, due to issues like storm damage and e-scooters, are showing signs of dangerous wear. My question is, does the council have any plans to upgrade the lighting and undertake more routine cleaning of the steps? And are there any longer term plans for the dangerous wearing of the steps? My other question is about Princess Park. The Princess Park toilets in Battery Point were due to be reopened in May. What is the expected completion date now of the refurbishment, and will the council take any additional measures to minimise any potential damage in the future, such as cameras or vandal-proof fixtures?
Thank you very much for your questions, Mr. Johnston. We'll take your questions on notice and provide you with a written response in due course. A copy of that response will be published in a future council agenda and you'll be notified. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the floor? No? Thank you. So we'll move now to item 6, which is petitions. Are there any petitions, CEO?
Chair, through you, there is one petition and that's been received by Mr Ryan Persilt. The subject matter is as follows: that traffic through West Hobart, Mount Stewart and Lena Valley is reaching unimaginable and dangerous levels. This route is used by residents from north and south of Hobart, LGA, as an alternative route to the Brooker Highway. It presents unnecessary risk to the residents of the affected suburbs and significantly affects the amenity of neighbourhoods. The action sought by the petitioner is as follows. The petition calls for the City of Hobart to address the traffic issues in West Hobart, Mount Stewart and Lena Valley through installation of traffic calming devices and speed limit reduction. This petition calls for consideration of traffic calming devices on the following streets: Mole Street, West Hobart, Hill Street, West Hobart, Mellifont Street, West Hobart, Mount Stewart Road, West Hobart, Byard Street, West Hobart, Montague Street, West Hobart, Doyle Avenue, West Hobart. It further calls for consideration of 40-kilometre speed limits and raised pedestrian crossings near each end of Lansdowne Crescent, the train park, between Hill Street Grocer and AA Lord Retirement Village, and Mount Stewart Memorial Hall. Chair, Deputy Lord Mayor, the total number of signatories to the petition are 576.
Thank you, CEO. And I note that Mr Purcell is here today. Thank you for your petition. Alderman Briscoe.
I just move that the petition be referred to the appropriate committee.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Harvey. Thank you. I'll put that. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 7, consideration of supplementary items.
Move.
Thank you, Alderman Zuko. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sherlock. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 8, indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Do we have anything to declare tonight? No. Thank you. We move now to item 9, and I note that council is now acting as a planning authority, and I'll call on Alderman Barakis to introduce the planning items. We start with 9.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.1, partial demolition, alteration and change of use to car park and associated
Thank
works.
you. Seconded by Councillor Dutta.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor, this is for, it's been a long time coming. I think this was initially discussed in the beginning of 2019. It's for a new bridge over Providence Rivulet, which will connect the existing Lefroy Street car park to the proposed car park, which will reduce that car park from 34 spaces to 33 spaces. However, the new parking area will consist of 36 new cars parking spaces, 28 public spaces, as well as 8 private spaces. There are a number of additional works that will be taken as part of this: landscaping, infrastructure for voucher meters, bicycle parking racks and lighting, and there will be some extensive work on the rivulet and retaining wall to preserve that rivulet. Deputy Lord Mayor, as I said, this has been quite a long time coming. I think the community in North Hobart has been long crying for work in this space and parking for those businesses, especially during those peak times. So it's great to see this is coming along. I just do have one question through you to the relevant director. What would be the timeline on works commencing for this?
Mr. Doyle or Mr. Doyle?
Chairman, we will be, if council does issue a permit this evening, we'll move immediately to a detailed design and call tenders. I'm hopeful that construction will be underway by the end of the calendar year, but it will be dependent on us attracting a contractor. So I understand there's 2 to 3 months' work once we've got the contractor in place.
Thank you. So with that, Deputy Lord Mayor, I highly commend this. It's recommended for approval by council officers, and we had one representation which was supportive of the proposal.
Second.
Oh, we've already seconded it. Any further discussion? I'll just make a couple of points. So this has been, as Alderman Barakis has said, it's been quite a long time coming. There were quite a lot of changes that had to occur in relation to change of use, but also the titles, I believe. So it has been in the pipeline for quite some time. It will increase that parking area to 64 parks, so it will be 36 extra. We lose a couple, but there will be not only bicycle parking in that vicinity, but also electric vehicle recharging. And this is around the important Providence Rivulet, so it's on either side of the Providence Rivulet. There is quite a lot of pedestrian traffic, so that permeability, I'm assured, will be improved for pedestrians to get to Elizabeth Street from both Burnett Streets and Lefroy Street. So it is a good upgrade, an upgrade out of sight for parking, so to speak, behind shops, and should be quite welcome once it is there for North Hobart. So if there's no further discussion, Alderman Barakis, do you want to sum up?
I don't think that's necessary, Deputy.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 9.2. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.2 for partial demolition alterations at 98 and 100 Augusta Road, Lena Valley.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Thank you. Deputy, the proposal includes a change of trading hours from between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, minor external alterations including replacing a window with a door and a minor alteration to the external storeroom wall, internal fit out in line with new tenant requirements, and 21 new signs. Deputy, this had 6 representations objecting to the proposal, and officers have recommended approval.
Thank you. Further discussion? If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 9.3.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.3, 369 Huon Road, South Hobart.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy, this is for the demolition of an existing terrace, planter boxes and ancillary structures on the eastern side of the dwelling, constructions of a raised terrace, a pool with an infinity overflow, construction of a 14.6 metre long masonry wall along the eastern side boundary. There's a number of boundary walls. This had 20 representations objecting to the proposal, and one of the main elements being that wall, and it was recommended for approval subject to conditions. There was quite a bit of discussion around this, but I think it was clear that even though there was some concerns of the impact on residential amenity, this did ultimately comply with the planning scheme.
Further discussion. Councillor Coates?
Look, just to note that there was an advice clause added that the applicant's encouraged to have further discussions with their neighbour. In committee it was, a process went by, but look, ultimately it was found that it does comply with the scheme, albeit hopefully, seeing as they'll be with each other, they will be neighbourly. But yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Data?
Thank you, Chair. I took notice of the objections by 20 representatives in this particular matter, and clause 11.4.2p3 states very clearly that the sitting and scale of a dwelling must not have a visual impact, which is going to cause a visual impact on the amenity. And it is my view, and again, using my own discretion, I would vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Yes, look, I visited a couple of weeks ago now the neighbour that's most impact, and it is a small backyard she has, and a lovely garden full of plants and vegetables and whatever. I was there in the late afternoon when the sun was setting, and her garden was still in sun. Now, the effect of this development will be to reduce the sun, and I'm really disappointed that the applicant did not change, mainly apparently because of the designer didn't want to change. I think the applicant probably would if it was his decision, but anyway, just moving the swimming pool a little bit in a different place. We've put advice, I believe, on the. I suggest that we put advice on the application to if during the building permit process that if the applicant could make some minor changes to help the neighbour, that the council would be advised that would be happening. Now, could happen. We can't condition it because as presumably the acting chair or the person who's put this motion before us tonight, it does follow the planning scheme. And if we gave false hope to the neighbour that in any appeal that they would win, I think it's giving false hope. And reluctantly, I will support the motion, knowing that at least we had an advice clause put in, and we are aware of the impact. Unlike the previous speaker, I am exercising my discretion in favour of the officer's report.
Thank you. Further discussion? Alderman Barakis, did you want to sum up?
No, thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Those against?
Data and Deputy Lord Mayor. It's carried, Deputy, 7 votes to 2.
Thank you. All right. 9.4, Churchill Avenue.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move item 9.4 for the change of use to visitor accommodation at Unit 7, 337 Churchill Avenue.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, this is one that the majority of the council of the committee, I think it may have even been unanimous, but I can't remember exactly, supported. This is for a change of use to visitor accommodation. It's 2 bedrooms and a floor area of approximately 166 square metres, including the garage. The application received one representation in support of the proposal. And comes before council because it was called in by an elected member. So I'll commend this one, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Discussion? No discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? No. Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Those against?
Deputy Lord Mayor. It's carried, Deputy. 8 votes to 1.
Thank you. Motion's carried. We go now to item 9.5, 4 Rupara Avenue.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move 9.54 Rupara Avenue, change of use to visitor accommodation, West Hobart.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Coates.
Thought I was going to be left hanging there for a sec. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is for a change of use to a 3-bedroom single dwelling and attached 1-bedroom bedsit from residential to 2 visitor accommodation units. It provides no on-site parking. This one was, and apologies, I should have started. I'll be moving the officer recommendation because I think this came without a decision from the committee. Apologies. So I'll be moving that recommendation. This received number of representations. I'm just scrolling down to where, but effectively this was a bit more contentious than the previous item, but ultimately, and I think this is where the committee was split, was the nature of the planning directive and what our powers are to approve or refuse applications under this. So I'd commend the officer's recommendation. I won't belabour the point as to why, because I think we've had this debate done to death here. I would just say that we need to be mindful of the risks that we incur when sending these things inevitably to the appeals tribunal.
Further discussion, Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think a few of us have visited this street, and it was quite evident that this is a really tricky street. The camber on the road, the relation of the road to the nature strip is quite steep, which makes it awkward getting out of a car on that particular side. The residents in the street have a particular pattern of behaviour when it comes to parking. Everybody knows where to park. And that's an established pattern because most of the people in this street are permanent residents, or all of the people in the street are permanent residents in the street. So having a whole home short stay accommodation occur in the street will have a detriment to people who live in that street with regard to parking and access to their car parks and access to their driveways. If someone parks awkwardly in that street, it has a knock-on effect. So I'll be foreshadowing a recommendation for refusal based on parking and access, because as I said, it's a very awkward street, and for any newcomer into that street, where they park will have a knock-on effect for everybody else in the street. And I think that sort of inconvenience shouldn't be tolerated with the rollout of short stay accommodation. So I have a lot of sympathy for all of the people in the street, and those who have put in deputations are concerned about the parking and access in that street. So I won't be supporting a recommendation for approval, and I think we should look at this for recommendation of refusal based on the detriment that the parking from people not familiar with the street will cause.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, just very quickly, I agree with Councillor Harvey. It is unfortunately an awkward street. However, every resident on that street has access to it, and the evidence that was provided in the officer's report to us didn't indicate that we have the grounds to support a refusal. And my belief is, if this did go to tribunal, it would be at ratepayers' expense, unfortunately, and we'll be unsuccessful. It was very pleasing in the committee that we had a unanimous vote, and that is to actually refer the parking in that street to Infrastructure Committee. I know this might be of relatively cold comfort to the other residents and the people that put in representations, but at the end of the day, we're here to apply the planning scheme, and 4 Park Avenue, in my view, does have the ability to change of use to visitor accommodation. It does have the ability, obviously, for parking on the street, as does every other house in that street. However, if by going to the Infrastructure Committee and allowing the city's officers and the Infrastructure Committee to investigate that street, hopefully we can actually come up with a better outcome for everyone on that street. And so, look, as I said, it may be cold comfort, but I think it is the appropriate outcome. Thanks.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, look, sometimes you know, we can look at things, and Councillor Harvey's made a very good point. There is an issue here on the street. In the street, there is an issue with people that are parking there, but also it's good to hear that there's a group of residents that want to sort of work together and find the right places to park on this street. I think that's absolutely amazing. It doesn't mean to say that a change of use can't mean that the owner of the property can't still actually go down that track. So I'd like to move an amendment on providing some advice to the applicant that as part of the advertising of the establishment, the proponent works with any person that may be there for a short stay on the car parking aspect of the street and to respect the way people park on the street. Now, how do I know this, Deputy? I do actually run quite a number of establishments here in Melbourne and here, and as part of my advice that I give back, and it's an automatic advice, it goes automatically back to the proponents, we fully explain the car parking aspect of our apartments. And that could be something that the proponents of this establishment could do in the sense that if they could work with council officers in respect of the advice is not a condition. Advice is to provide some guidance to the proponents on assisting those people in the street in respect of the car parking situation, and that could be something that the proponent could put in their spiel and be an automatic response to anyone that books. I've got that on about 5 different platforms in my thing. If someone asks me a question about car parking, someone asks me a question about restaurants and other things, there's automatic answers that go automatically there. And you know, respecting, just one of the things that I do as well is respecting other people in the establishment, because I run in one group 6 establishments. So all those little things can be done by advice. So if we could provide that advice to the proponents, it's an amendment, or if the two.
I'll second.
Second? Okay, that's fine.
Would you like that as part of PLN 18, which is about the manager? These measures must include, but are not limited to, the following requirements.
But
I
it's
presume
advice.
that's where it should go, Mr. Noy?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Wherever it's got to go, but it's just advice.
So could you just describe exactly what your
that
is?
that advice is provided to the proponents of this establishment, right, to work with the director on mitigating car parking in this street, considering the situation of car parking. That's probably the best way of wording it. Okay.
Okay, so that's probably not in that visitor plan.
Well,
Mr.
that's
Noy?
part of their management plan.
Sorry,
Okay, I'll add that too.
Mr. Noy, can you advise, please?
Yes, Chair. Look, I think that it's an issue that should be incorporated as part of the management plan, that guests are informed of the challenges in relation to parking in that street, and that can be a requirement of that management plan, that they engage or provide information around those issues as part of the booking process.
You happy with that?
I'm happy with that. I'm just trying to massage this in so it helps the situation.
Okay, so I think that's. I think we have this amendment. Does anybody want to speak to the amendment? if there's nobody who wants to speak to the amendment, I'll put that amendment. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The amendment's carried. We'll go back to further discussion on the substantive motion. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I refer to the statement made by the officers on page 10 of 16, and it says it may be argued that the proposed use may generate less parking demand, as not all patrons may utilize a motor vehicle. Now, my question through you is, on what is this based on? Do you have any evidence that they don't use motor vehicle?
Yes, Chair. I think the officers were alluding to the fact that some guests may have vehicles and some guests may not. That is not uncommon or unreasonable expectation in this instance.
Thank you very much. I think the answer is a very good answer. On that particular basis, I can allude in here on the same basis that on the contrary, it can be argued, or it may be argued, that the proposed use may generate more parking demand, and not all patrons not use but use motor vehicle, and therefore basing that as a contrary argument to this, I would not support this. Thank you.
Further discussion? If there's no further discussion, then I'll put the motion for approval with that carried amendment. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against?
No.
Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Suko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe,
Those against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Deputy Lord Mayor. That's carried 5 votes to 4.
Okay, thank you. We move on to item 9.6, which is 100 Pinnacle Road. Alderman Barakis.
You, Deputy Lord Mayor, I'll move that.
Councillor Sherlock, seconded.
Thank you. So planning approval for upgrade to water infrastructure at Ferntree Bower at 100 Pinnacle Road, Ferntree. I won't go through the entire list of this unless people want to hear about the dimensions of precast concrete pits and below ground infrastructure and actuated butterfly valves. But there's an extensive amount of infrastructure work going in there to help with our help the bower, which manages the flow of water into the drinking water system during high rainfall events. So it's obviously much needed work, Deputy Lord Mayor. This had no representations. It's recommended by officers for approval, and it's in front of council because it includes works on council land that isn't a road.
Further discussion.
Just very briefly, yes, it is a great upgrade. It has gone through the Wellington Park Trust, which you've given approval, and also it will stop. We may reduce the call-outs by Tas Water staff in dreadful conditions to go up there to turn things off when the water becomes too muddy to be in the system. So I think it's automating the water supply, that part of the water supply. So it's a good move. It's not going to affect the vegetation or the wildlife, and no one probably will notice. Thank
you. Further discussion? Alderman Barakis, do you wish to summarise?
No, I don't think that's
all right.
necessary.
I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 10, significant tree nomination, Glenrose Park. Alderman Barakis.
I'll move that, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Sherlock seconded that. Thank you.
Move the recommendation that the nominated trees adjoining the creek within Glenrose Park at 110 Pottery Road, Alina Valley, not be listed as significant trees in the significant tree register and the significant tree code of the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme 2015, and that the nominee be advised of council's decision. Just to sum up, the report that was provided to the committee does not consider that all nominated trees, only the hawthorn trees adjoining the creek within Glenrose Park at 110 Pottery Road, as works involving these trees have been planned by the city's Bushland Biodiversity and Waterways Unit. as per that, it's recommended that these not be listed. But I think what's being planned will hopefully keep everybody happy.
Thank you. Further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. We move now to motions of which notice has been given, and item 11 was to be Councillor Fox, so I'll ask that somebody move to defer that.
Yeah, look, Deputy, I'll move for deferral, but I'd just like to ask a question, if I may, through you to the CEO.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Harvey.
Considering that on September 3rd we go down the track of blank caretaker. And this is being deferred. Would this be deferred until the next council? Could you give clarification as to where it's going to go? Because we're on caretaker mode in September. I'd just like to know. So, sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor, and through to you, Alderman. My understanding is, based on the timing, it would actually fall within the caretaker period, as outlined in our policy. So I think this is actually the last meeting outside of that policy. So we'll provide advice accordingly to the elected member who's actually put this notice of motion forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a procedural motion, so I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 12, Conflicts of Interest Advisory Panel. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'll speak briefly on this one.
Can I have somebody second it?
Thank
you.
Look, I guess the genesis of this comes up more and more. We're seeing relatively contentious items, or being the city of Hobart is, we're seeing items where there might be perceived more of an actual conflict of interest. When you read the Act is reasonably broad. You know, a conflict isn't just yourself, it could be a close associate, a family member. And look, it's incumbent on us as elected members to declare a conflict where it's appropriate. And look, I think we have a very good, strong track record in doing that. But ultimately, as an organisation, we want to encourage the highest level of governance, of transparency and standards. And I think by virtue of having this function available to elected members and to staff in the community, it encourages that within the community. There will always be items that come up before us as elected members and before council where either there is a conflict of interest and people appropriately declare, or often what happens is a bit of a grey area where there's perceived conflict of interest. And I think if the community know that there is a standing mechanism where we can receive appropriate advice in this regard, it encourages their knowledge that there is sound governance practice and that we are able to receive good advice in that regard. And look, I'll give you an example. There was an application going back 18 months now where it was very near to my house, and someone was putting in a thing saying this is too big a development, it's going to destroy the area, it's going to destroy the thing, and I was sitting there having to look at it and going, well, actually this thing's pretty much directly opposite where I live. Should I be declaring an interest or not? And I had to go and seek advice on that, but no one knew that I'd sought that advice. You know, there isn't a standing mechanism. We just sort of have to take it on trust, and the fact I didn't declare meant that I didn't have a conflict. But I just think we've had a very successful model with the Urban Design Advisory Panel, where ultimately, and you know, it is just advice, but ultimately we are able to receive that, and I think it's been quite successful. I think more and more with contentious stuff coming up, it is appropriate that there is a standing mechanism, and I think ultimately it should encourage more trust in the community, in our decision making, and where it is appropriate we do declare, and where there might be a perceived conflict, they can have the full knowledge and trust that elected members are able to receive advice and to have acted appropriately. I would commend the motion to council, and I would note that this is to have officers prepare a report to come back on the mechanism of such. So.
Alderman Suko.
Chair, look, the reason why I support this is because conflict of interests have been a contentious item on this council for as long as I've been on council. There's actually been, at times, some little bit of nasty debate in respect of it, and I think it's about time that we had someone that could actually assist us and give us advice. Of course, it's all up to the individual elected member to make the decision, but I think it takes that would take the onus away from a number of us going to the CEO or our legal officer here and putting them in a spot, and now they're going to turn around and say, well, it's up to you to make that decision, which I think is fine. But if we had someone else giving us some advice, it'd be good. I just want to point out, and I'll just give you some examples of where conflicts of interest or pecuniary interests don't play a role. Back when the tramway proposal was in front of this council, there was actually going to be a tram stop right immediately outside my building in North Hobart. I sought advice legally, actually, and I didn't declare an interest. I was taken to the panel, and the panel found that I didn't have an interest for the very reasons that it was going to benefit the greater good of Hobart. Just like tonight, I sort of looked at the car park that was being built at Lefroy Street. One could perceive I own the same property in North Hobart that's going to be on the other side of the road. Is that going to benefit me or not? It's in the similar light as that. It's going to benefit the greater good of Hobart. So conflicts of interest sometimes are not as clear cut as what people may think. But I'll just give you another example. If by chance the 325 over the road was going to build a brand new restaurant, I'd declare an interest, because that is not the benefit of the greater Hobart. It's a business competition. So there is a difference, and it's good to have people that can give us that advice. And I'll just say to everyone in this chamber, every time I've felt that I've had a conflict or not conflict of interest, I over the years have spoken to the CEO, and I've always had the same answer: is you have to do that. So I always pick up the phone, ring my lawyer, and actually get legal advice on it, because that's where I feel comfortable. But if there was another mechanism, I think it would be a good way to go. It's only calling for a report, and it'd be in the best interest of all elected members, and in particular any new elected members that come onto this council.
Further discussion? Alderman Baraka.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this is a good motion, especially just reflecting on my time, especially when I first came into this council. And you have issues, especially around, as was said, not pecuniary interests are a lot more simple, because if you stand to benefit from it, then you have an interest. The non-pecuniary ones tend to be a bit more grey, and especially when you're not experienced in that space, you have times where it's down the road from where I live or whatever, but I don't actually have an interest in it. And if I declare an interest in this, does that mean I have to declare an interest in everything that's similar? And you get worried about what precedents you're setting. So it would be very beneficial to have some advice, because I know that when questions are asked around this, the response is it's up to elected members to determine whether or not they have a conflict of interest. But I could stand here hand on heart and say that an item comes up, or anyone here could stand hand on heart and say that an item comes up, I've got no interest in it. But members of the public could either unknowingly or deliberately misconstrue that to imply that there is a conflict of interest there. So having some concrete advice. I've seen times where I think people around this room have declared a conflict where I didn't think that there was one, and I've seen times where debates continued and people haven't declared, and I absolutely think that they should have. But it's always difficult to say anything about that, because it's ultimately up to the individual member. So I think some clarity, especially for new members, and I think it's timely given that we'll be going into a new council very soon, and we may or may not have some new members. We'll have at least one. That people go into these decisions and they're knowing when to declare and when not to declare a conflict of interest is a decision that could have pretty significant consequences for one if they make it incorrectly. And I think it can only assist elected members, it can only improve the level of governance in this place if people make those decisions fully informed and with their eyes open, and with a sense of clarity and, importantly, consistency, so that everyone's making decisions according to the same standard. So I'd commend this, Deputy.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Chair, yes, I think I commend it as well. It seems like the conflict of interest understanding changes with the panel. Talking to a lawyer recently about this issue, they actually referred to a case, the only code of conduct that I'd ever had against me, and still, touch wood, in my years at council, where it got dismissed, but that apparently demonstrated a very high standard, gold standard it was described to me, and yet 4 years since that's happened, it was 4 years, the panel have changed what they think a conflict of interest is, and it's a lower standard now. So I think by having a panel, and we'll come back with a report with how it could be worked, but I think it would save a whole heap of hassle that you have to go and get your own legal advice generally, and you have the community. I think the integrity of the decision making we make, if we say we've gone to the panel and they've given us advice about the conflict and I've chosen to take that advice and I declare an interest, or I've gone to this panel, they advised that it was no conflict and I've taken that advice. So it's a good protecting the council's integrity of decision making. And note that in other states there are a lot stricter rules, and you often see council mayors and deputy mayors being even imprisoned at times because they didn't declare conflicts of interest with developers. And I think the CEO would have experience from her time in Victoria that interest in terms of the cases that would have come up in Victoria, that the law for the local government there is a lot stricter than the law here in conflicts of interest. Now, it may change with legislation, the legislative changes, but I still think in the meantime we've got to be able to protect ourselves and increase the integrity of our decision making.
Further discussion. Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, look, I think it is a good motion. One of the things I think that comes into my mind mind in this one is that if someone has, as Alderman Baracus explained, what he thought was a clear conflict, and that is ultimately part of an appeal case, and one or two, hopefully not more than that, elected members are shown to be considered objectively from an outsider's perspective as having a conflict on all reasonable grounds, because it's got to be a reasonable test, although it is an individual test, it still has to be a reasonable test at law, then that can upset the soundness of that decision by the council, and it could be quite dangerous for the validity of that decision making, particularly on an appeal. I think we've got to be careful in determining when the report comes back where that advice comes from, because as Alderman Baracus again said, gold standards or Alderman Briscoe, there is of course the original decisions which related to the Queenstown Council, and there's a number of variations. We had someone in this chamber when I first got here who said, I can't vote on this because my brother is employed at the hospital. And I thought, well, how far does this go? You know, brother. I mean, you could have a brother you haven't spoken to for 20 years, but you've still got a conflict. I mean, I think it can be carried too far, but I think the idea of having that sound... I'll just wait.
Keep going. Yep, you're fine.
I think having the value of that sounding board, I think would be good. Question becomes though, will it be someone, is it going to be a lawyer, a legal panel, or is it going to be someone who just has, you know, a very good common sense approach to it? But that'll come back in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Deputy, yeah, look, in the past, I think the advice was always, if in doubt, sit it out. And I think that was good advice, and maybe that advice is no longer as relevant today as it was then. I think one of the issues that I'd like to understand is this is a cost shift from us paying our own legal advice towards the council having a system for obtaining legal advice, and whether that's the same lawyer for everyone or advisor for everyone, or whether people want to get their own lawyer to give them the advice and then expect it to be paid. I would imagine that if this was a thing, we would have the same person providing advice regularly, rather than, you know, finding your own advice for twice as much as the one we're using within house or whoever we use for the service. So I think that's an issue I'd like to have explained. Who would provide the advice and what would the cost for the service be, and how often could you do it? Would it be you're looking for advice all the time with regard to conflicts of interest? I don't think that would be a big deal. I think we all know the kind of conflicts of interest around the table that get raised fairly regularly. That's to do with short stay accommodation, with councillors in that business as well, and UTAS being a member of the UTAS, the Save UTAS Society.
Can I just correct that? I am not a member of Save UTAS.
Point of order.
Well, it's
okay. No, okay. I'll retract it if you're not a member. Okay. If you're not a member, then
I'm not a member.
Okay. Yep. But things like that come up fairly regularly, so I'm leaning towards having a report on this just to understand it a bit more thoroughly, to see whether or not this is an advantage to all of us here. But the cost shifting away from us, I don't think we get legal advice very often to see if we've got a conflict of interest. And if you think you've got a conflict of interest, then you probably have. But that extra legal advice might help you determine it.
Further discussion?
I just have a few questions through you, Chair.
Nutter?
The first question is with regards to the current convention and practice when there is a conflict of interest. Is there a difference between advice as from the perspective of governance from an internal lawyer we have in the House, and is there an external advice, is a legal advice? Are there two different issues here?
CEO?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and through to you, Councillor. So our practice really is guided by the independence of officers, as I know you appreciate. So often when we are asked to give advice on matters relating to code of conduct, sorry, not code of conduct, conflict of interest, we do actually seek that from independent legal counsel, and that's done often at arm's length. So as outlined in Council's policy, we are able to procure that advice for elected members when they're asked the question, and we ensure that that advice is provided in the most timely way possible. But it's really important to note for the record, Deputy Lord Mayor, that in no way do council officers provide advice, because as has been discussed tonight by a number of elected members, it is the business of elected members to determine whether they in fact have a conflict. However, of course, to support elected members in the execution of their duties, we do seek at times that independent legal advice and provide it directly to the member. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dutton?
Thank you very much. And the second question is, so once the legal advice is given by the lawyers, is it still the onus is on the individual elected member either to accept that or reject that?
CEO?
Deputy Lord Mayor, that's correct, Councillor. So it's very much in the hands of the individual elected member to still determine in their own minds whether that advice is what they'll go with. Again, advice is just that, it is advice, and ultimately the decision lies with the elected member. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the motion, and I think it is good. I don't know if it's election time, that's why all these motions are coming through, but it's good. Good for us to debate it, to discuss it. Let me just draw a few points from this discussion that we have had. Point number one, there is the Local Government Act that clearly states that the responsibility is ours. The onus is completely ours. I can get a legal opinion, a legal advice, I can reject it. It will mean nothing to me because I will have to make the call. So that's my take on it. That's my understanding of this. So by setting another panel will not make any difference because the call is going to be based on the individual member. Point number two is this, that many of us here, when we have come in the grey area, as the term was used, we seek opinion and advice. When I have been given the information from a governance perspective internally. I am referred to the rules and regulations and the provisions that are there in the Code of Conduct and the Act. There is no legal advice coming to me from internally. However, there have been times when external legal advice has been given to me, that is a different matter. And the panel will do the same thing. There is no difference. If you set up a panel, or if there is an issue which we feel is a grey area, we go and seek advice. In law, there is a wonderful practice, and those of us who have done law many, many years ago might understand, when it comes to practice and convention. And in law, there is this practice and convention that for many years, those of the senior elected members who are here, we have heard that they've gone through this process many a time. But at the end of the day, we are held responsible by the Act. And so the individual member, regardless of the advice, makes the decision. So my take on this is this, that if I was to change a label on a poison bottle and call it lemonade, the content will not change. So if we are simply, what I'm saying to say, if we come in a grey matter and we go and seek legal advice and it's given to us, by simply changing the label and calling it a panel, it won't matter, it won't do anything at all, because the advice will be given to us either individual lawyer or the panel. The decision will be mine or on each one of us to make the decision either yes or no. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, I appreciate this motion as well, and I think in essence it's a good one. But before I do commence speaking, I would just like to ask a question through you, maybe to the councillor who's actually put this motion, or actually maybe firstly to the team or our legal team. Did Councillor Coates seek any, because I know when I put up motions I seek advice from from our admin team or our staff. I was just wondering, did Councillor Coates come to ask any advice with regards to this motion?
A question best answered by Councillor Coates, or
Coates, if
you feel like you want to answer that, Councillor Coates?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, happy to. Before I put this in, I did actually speak to our legal officer, and I outlined what I intended to do and my concerns. I wasn't seeking the advice necessarily as to the merits of my motion. I believe it's meritorious, and I think if you look at the administrative response, they haven't outlined any major concerns with it. I was actually seeking to go down a path of having this go to Committee First Finance and Governance. Unfortunately, I missed it by one day, and the advice then came back that it needed to come to Council now because we are going into caretaker. So, and I think as to fully answer your question, the natural outcome of that was to sort of bring it on, but ideally, and I regret that this wasn't possible, this would have been able to go to committee first so we could actually have a sit down with officers at the table and sort of thrash it out that little bit more. Thank you. But I appreciate that the administrative response hasn't identified any problems.
Councillor Sherlock?
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. The reason I ask that is because probably like Councillor Coates and probably like if we were to get advice legally, I actually find that the premise of this particular motion, while in essence it's a really good one, I actually find when you read Part 5 of the Act, or when you look at various different pieces of information that we have around conflict of interest, it appears that as though it could potentially be unlawful, this particular motion. Now, the reason why I say that is because those who have probably practiced law or have had lived experience of practicing this conflict of interest over decades and decades, the Act specifically sets out, it's not silent, it specifically sets out how conflict of interest is to be dealt with. And I'm kind of shocked in terms of putting something like this forward that is potentially unlawful. So the premise is an issue of legality for me. And I think it would be really great if we could get legal advice on the legality of this, of whether such a motion is actually allowed, before we say, well, look, we need to have a panel set up. Because it's putting the, the horse before the cart, as I think, or the cart before the horse, as Alderman Zuko often says. So I think it's really important that we seek the legal advice and say, yeah, look, this is not unlawful, this particular motion, because the Act clearly sets everything out. And if we're going outside the scope of the Act, it's unlawful in nature. And that to me is what this potentially is. It's unlawful in nature, and I think we need to get that resolved legally before we actually say, okay, we need this. But I do understand this motion, and I think it's a really good idea. I just have a really big issue with the lawfulness of it. Thank you.
Do you want to ask the mover of the motion as to whether he'll accept that in?
Or defer it? Or
Look, I mean, in answer to your question, I think if we were to ask for a report on a conflict of interest advisory function, in the substantive putting together that report, council officers would no doubt advise if it's not possible under law. I would also note that they have, in responding to comments on this motion, they haven't indicated. Now, I'm not suggesting and trying to put words in their mouth that they've had this reviewed legally, but look, there has been no indication from anyone that it's unlawful to seek this. But the motion isn't to set up the advisory function. The motion is to provide a report into an advisory function. So if the belief is that the advisory function is illegal, this motion isn't to set up the advisory function.
Yes, sorry, my point.
We might just hear from the CEO just in relation to
I'd like to ask a question.
It's all right,
okay.
Alderman Zico. CEO, could you just...
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, as a matter of course, we would of course seek legal opinion if we were concerned about that. It will form the basis of a future report. Like many other notices of motion, we do often need external advice in order to put a full report in front of council for full consideration. Thank you, Deputy.
Have you finished, before I take your question, have you finished? Or
I haven't. Yeah, so I think if that would be okay if Councillor Coates could incorporate that, or we're just assuming that that's definitely going to be part of the process. We will get that independent legal advice to say whether this is actually, if it's allowed to set up a panel for this particular purpose under the Act.
Through you, Deputy Lord Mayor, I can provide that advice with certainty. It's a process that we'd undertake as part of the due diligence in regards to giving you our best officer advice.
Thank you.
Well, Deputy, I was actually going to ask a question to the CEO, which has already been answered, but I'm still going to ask the question because it's on the same lines. Considering that we've had an elected member suggest that this is illegal, as part of the reporting process to council, because it's being called for a report, would the CEO seek the appropriate advice and legal advice as to whether or not this matter would be legal or not, and report back to council when the report comes back to the new council?
Deputy Lord Mayor, of course, just to reiterate, if indeed this turned out to be ultra-virus in terms of the establishment of a panel was ultra-virus, that would certainly be explored in the officer report back to the Chamber, Lord Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, CEO.
All right, I might have a little say myself. Just a question, CEO. In relation to conflicts of interest and the review by of local government in Tasmania, do you think this is likely to be covered off with that as a part of that review?
Through you, Lord Mayor, Deputy rather, I have outlined this previously in a report actually that came to council, and it was part of council's submission to the local government reform process, and it did talk about conflict of interest, and it is something that certainly has been flagged to date as part of the review of the Local Government Act, the need to strengthen the conflict of interest provisions contained within the Act itself. I do understand that that is likely to be presented as part of the reform agenda, albeit the formal Act review has been paused whilst the local government reform review is underway, but I do anticipate that conflict of interest will be something that's covered, including new requirements of elected members going forward, not dissimilar to other jurisdictions, Deputy.
Good, thank you. And on that note, I mean, whilst I see some of the merits and what you're trying to do, Councillor Coates, I think it's a broader thing than our council. I think that there will be benefit to a lot of this being less grey and more, you know, a lot more clear information and guidance as set out by legislation and this review. If there's no further discussion, did you want to sum up, Councillor Coates?
Look, just briefly, only because I think it was a very constructive debate. or discussion, if I can call it that, and a few questions were raised, and I guess I'll attempt as best I can to answer them. Look, I guess at the outset I said the genesis of this was ultimately to try and increase the transparency of governance and the trust in our decision making, and I'm not saying that to try and cast aspersions and say that there's not, but you know, I do get a sense that we are dealing often with very contentious items with, and we've seen it in this chamber. It was raised an example by members from people say, oh, but you've got a conflict because of X, or you know, that tram stop might go in front of your building, and I think by having a standing mechanism, it helps defray that. I mean, in the best sense of the word, if advice is received that says no, there's no conflict there, or you don't need to declare a conflict, that does help to defend against public attacks. And some of those public attacks might not necessarily be against the individual elected member. They might actually be against the council and reputation of this council as a decision-making body. Obviously, if you receive advice that says, well, actually, there probably is a conflict there and you should declare one, well, that provides certainty. So, and we are, you know, it is a quite small town, and we've all got different aspects to it. So look, I do think clearly conflicts will arise. That's why there's a section in the Act. As to whether it's lawful, I think the officers have answered that very succinctly. Whether it is or not, I no doubt will come back in the report. I look forward to receiving it. I do believe it is. I haven't seen any evidence otherwise, but if it's not lawful, well, don't progress with it. That's sort of stop at the gate. I think there was a good question raised by Councillor Harvey in a debate in regards to the cost shift. Look, the intent of this really isn't to try and cost shift stuff onto council. And I note that confusingly in the agenda it's listed as a conflict of advisory panel, but the actual motion talks about a function. And in the wording, in the rationale, I've said might be an independent expert or experts. And I know in my opening speech I talked about the Design Advisory Panel, which is a large panel. It may well just end up being one person who is an expert in this area, and if there's those really niggly grey areas, that can be referred to them. So I'm hoping it doesn't come at a huge cost. Noting section 3 of the Officer's Administration comments in their initial assessment, that will be a consideration, and no doubt when a report comes back, you know, to be frank, if it costs $1 million, it's probably not going to be worth it. But at the same time, and keeping in mind we are going to a new election, you would hate to have a scenario where someone genuinely did have a worry about. Could I have an extra two minutes or a minute?
Do we usually with
Yes.
summing up?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Moved by Alderman Baracus, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Those in favour. Those against. Items carried.
Thank you very much, and I will try and keep it. Look, I would hate to have a scenario come forward where you've got someone who thinks there might be or might not be, they err on one side, and the only reason they didn't do so was they might be in a position where they couldn't bear that cost. And lastly, I guess I'd just like to reiterate that ultimately, by virtue of having the advisory function there, hopefully it just engineers a better level of transparency and trust in the community about the decisions that we make, and that we follow appropriately. I've seen it many times where people are accused of having a conflict of interest or perceived to have one, when perhaps there actually isn't one, and it's very appropriate that they represent their community and actually sit in on a discussion on the thing. The Local Government Act in Tasmania is very broad. As Alderman Thomas raised in debate, you could have a brother you haven't spoken to for 20 years. If that brother's got a conflict, you've got a conflict. It is very broad, and the sanctions, if I can say, in the Act are also very strong. So it is very appropriate that we do receive that advice where it's appropriate to do so. And I do think that it is worthy having an investigation, and I think an advisory function is of a lot of merit. So look, I'll commend the motion.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 13, Hobart Sydney Interrupt Project. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I move the motion on the books.
Seconded by Alderman Baracus.
Thank you. Look, and we have got the proponent of this project, Sam McLennan, in the audience, and I imagine he'll never want to come to another council meeting in his life. Now, I would have liked to to have gone through a committee, but because of the timing, the similar sort of timing issue that we're moving into the caretaker mode at the next council meeting, it would not have fitted the cycle of committees. So, but however, the proponent has put together a very, very good rationale for this project. And essentially it is to demonstrate the amount of waste that is entering our marine environment and causing negative impacts on other people, organisations, organisms and ecosystems. And I won't go through all of it, but certainly I did meet Sam at a homelessness rally at Parliament House Parliament House Lawns a few weeks ago, and he was one of the speakers. He's a gentleman that lives in his car because of the homelessness issue. But however, talking to him on the phone and again last week, I am confident that this person can achieve the goal. And the goal, and he's almost finished the raft, which consists of marine debris that's essentially come from fishing and fish farms and particularly fish farms. And he's constructed a raft which he has been getting engineering advice. He's described in his rationale that people have a mixed reaction to it, and the one I like it, and I do like it, is the words inspiring, emotionally moving and motivated. Now, he describes the risk mitigation that he's undertaking, including discussions with the appropriate marine authorities. He's got support from a mainland council at this stage, and I imagine other mainland councils will come on board, and maybe even other councils on the east coast of Tasmania. He intends to have trials in October, and shortly after, following those trials, he'll start sailing to Sydney, calling in at various places and highlighting the marine debris issue. He is an experienced person in boating. He's had 2 crossings of the Bass Strait and another international crossing, which I'd escape my mind which one it was, but he has been. I have been in the Sydney Hobart boat race, and I was talking to him last week describing the 50-foot waves going across Bass Strait, and he said he's been in waves like that, or conditions like that. It's an unsinkable vessel. Even if holes appear in the drums or the barrels, it will still have, they'll still float. He's managed to get some significant sponsors. One sponsor, which is listed in the rationale, King G, has sponsored the documentary that is being made about it, the construction of it, and following the voyage to Sydney Hobart, hopefully arriving just about when the Sydney voyage, Sydney to Hobart yacht race starts. So it might be competing with a bit of media attention there. I think it's a fantastic journey, and it does remind me of the Kon-Tiki expedition in my youth, where they tried to demonstrate how human beings got from South America to the Pacific Islands, and it was very famous. Most people in this room would be too young to remember it, but it was a very famous voyage. So it reminds me of that, but with the modern day raising the idea of that should we continue putting plastics in our marine environment.
Alderman Briscoe,
Can I have one more minute?
Thank you. Moved by Alderman Zuko, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried.
Thank you for that. The significance to the Hobart City Council is that a documentary, I presume, it will be sold to Netflix and other streaming services. It will be covered by the ABC. If we demonstrate that we want him to be safe in this voyage by providing a certain amount of safety equipment with the discretion of the CEO, I'm pretty sure the CEO will be doing some risk assessment on her own in talking to the marine authorities, because we don't want to see the boat flip over in the middle of Bass Strait and with the City of Hobart logo on it. We certainly wouldn't want that to happen, but I'm confident that it is a good project. It's been proposed by a very inspiring young man, and I commend the motion to the council.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. Look, I think it's fantastic, and as somebody who at the age of not much dissimilar to the, well, maybe a bit younger than the proponent, sailed across to New Zealand after on a 35-foot boat, having done a bet with somebody in the family, ended up out there for 12 or 13 days. Fascinating time. It's just a couple of things that I think we just need to clean up a bit. Item 1 of the motion talks about provide access in the waste centre, and then as soon as you get into the discussion, it says number 2, the proponent is not seeking access to any waste plastics. We've got to be careful that these things get read by other people. And I'm just wondering if there's a grant, if there's a grant process open at the moment, why aren't we waiting for that grant process to finish? Which is, you know, here we're talking about a default situation of $10,000, but the grant application that's now open is for 15, and what if the applicant gets it? I mean, it just seems to me that, will we end up getting another, and nothing to disparage this particular project, do we suddenly end up getting 10 other contenders who lose in the next round, who come along and say, oh, well, you know, we put an application into that round that finished in September too, and we lost, but you gave somebody else some money before it even finished and before it was even considered. So I feel a bit safer to see the CEO how you feel this, if the CEO, if you would comment, because we've got a funding round there at the moment, which we're told in the application may well prove successful for this applicant, and yet here we are talking about, but if it doesn't work, we'll give you some money anyway.
So, question around the grant?
Yeah, it is around the grant. Yeah, sure.
CEO?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and also Alderman, for your question. In the context of notices of motion, it's incumbent upon the officers to provide their best available advice at the time that the notice of motion is submitted. So what we've done here is we've provided really a précis of the opportunities that are available for these sorts of initiatives at this point in time. It would be my intent, Deputy Lord Mayor, as with other notices of motion, to provide a report back if the council so resolved to do so. But there's nothing to stop in the meantime, Deputy Lord Mayor, the proponent actually applying through the round that's talked about here. And of course we wouldn't be doubling up. That would be considered in and of itself. I guess from a purely an administrative perspective, Deputy Lord Mayor, we'd be looking at whether the proponent did submit. We'd be coming back to you if, of course, council were of a mind to support the notice of motion with a full report that would be cognisant of those facts as they stood at the time, Deputy Lord Mayor. I hope that clarifies.
If I can, Deputy, so we're not actually tonight saying whatever happens up to $10,000 in the discretion of the CEO? I could ask my colleague, Alderman Briscoe, are you actually asking for the money?
My understanding, my intention of this motion was to, because it fits in with all the policies of the Hobart City Council, waste and so on, it's a unique opportunity. And because we're going into caretaker mode, that's why the CEO it's the CEO's call, not the council's call. Now, if we wait to the new council, it's probably after the event of this void. So it is really giving the CEO ability, maybe to talk with the proponent, saying we'll put in an application. There's two ways you could get it, but put in an application, and it's highlighting to the people that we are supportive of this type of project. In this particular, it's a unique one. This is time sensitive. It is time sensitive.
So, thank you for that explanation. Alderman Thomas, did you want to suggest an amendment to?
Oh, look, I think for what I'm hearing quite clearly is that we're leaving it for the CEO and the applicant, or through the CEO, one of the managers, talk with the applicant and determine the best way to go. And I think we'll leave it to the discretion of the Chief Executive.
And was there anything else that you were going to raise in relation to the motion?
Me?
Yes.
No, I think, as I say, I just, as long as it's very clear, as long as it's very clear in the decision that we have as a council delegated to the Chief Executive to use her discretion in discussions with the applicant.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Deputy, and thanks for the motion. I do appreciate it. I'm so pleased to see you talk really positively about plastic pollution. I'm very pleased with you. Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. I'm supportive of this because I think it's a good idea to keep promoting getting rid of single-use plastics and other plastics, and this also highlights marine plastics as well. And we know that there's a huge marine plastics problem from our salmon industry, and there's regularly people talking about the salmon farm plastics that they pick up on the coast around Tasmania. So I think this can highlight quite a number of issues with regard to plastics. I am concerned about the safety issues going forward and how the CEO deals with this with regard to allocating a grant, because this will all be done via a grant, and whether or not I don't think we could supply safety equipment, but we could contribute to the purchase of, and whether that fits within the, what do you call it, the grant guidelines and things. But yeah, I am supportive of this tonight. I wish the proponent all the best, because it is a very dangerous journey. I hope you make it. So look, I'm very pleased to see this come to council. I support it strongly. I'd like to think we can be part of this, because these sort of journeys can be cathartic, not just for the individual, but also a catalyst for raising awareness. Anyone listening? Hello?
Yep, sorry. We'll get to you in a moment. Yep, thank you. Sorry, we'll get to that point in a moment.
Okay, so
continue.
So I would like to think the council can be part of this. It is a big opportunity for us if it all goes well, to create some good coverage about the plastics issue. Crossing Bass Strait is no simple feat. I've got friends who have crossed it a number of times in their kayaks, and they're very skilled in what they've done. They had no issues. They know how to read the weather. They're very adventurous type people, and I hope that the proponent here also has those skills as well, which I'm sure he'll build up, but he hasn't got much time to do it. But anyway, I do support the motion tonight.
Thank you. And just before I hear from Councillor Sherlock, then Alderman Zuko, CEO, do you want to just point out that part 5 of the motion of the discussion points, please?
Thank you, Deputy, and apologies to you, Councillor Harvey. I was just wanting to make a point to the Deputy Lord Mayor before we moved on too far that we were unable to do it, and it was just to draw your attention to item 5 in the discussion. And this is really important, I think, for completeness in terms of the gallery and those tuning in tonight. There will be requirements around marine safety, of course, so we wouldn't be able to support something that didn't meet that threshold, and that's very clear in the discussion. So I think just for completeness, that's important to note. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. I was actually going to point that out, point number 5. I think it's really important to note that, the compliance with all requirements of the Marine and Safety Tasmania. I do commend this motion. I think it's a really great motion. I too wish you the best. And hope it goes well. I really like the fact that it's raising awareness for about plastic marine pollution, and the discussion that's been outlined there with various different proponents and connections that may potentially be made with organisations such as Rotary, GHD Environmental Consultants, Mewers, and the Bob Brown Foundation as well. So I think this is a really wonderful motion, and I commend it. Thank you, and wish you the best of luck.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I just sort of a bit of an idea. It was Councillor Harvey, how he was very supportive of this, and as we well know, Councillor Harvey's been very much heavily involved in our waste management. And would there be an idea? I don't know.
Going. I'm not going.
Send a delegation. I was throwing the hint out there as long as I could until someone got it. Lord Mayor, I've got to say, hopefully the raft might be able to fit 2 people on there, and I was going to move an amendment that maybe we should invite Councillor Harvey to sort of be part of the delegation. I think it would be absolutely sensational. Could just imagine the publicity out there. This new innovative approach by
our esteemed person who's built this, and one of the Hobart City Council elected members is going to partake in it. I've got to say, I'll say this: if Councillor Harvey does decide to go, I will personally sponsor him financially. So,
how many zeros?
There'll be a few zeros.
2.
I'll say this to you: there'll be 3 zeros. It's just depending on the other number, right? But if Councillor Harvey takes up the challenge, I will fund it. But I don't need to move it as an amendment. Hopefully, Councillor Harvey may speak to Alderman Briscoe and the proponent, and you never know, we could actually expand this even further.
6 zeros.
No, I said 3 zeros. Anyway, I'm glad you picked that. It's good.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I also would like to support this motion, and I'm very pleased because some time back, I remember in this council when we were talking about plastic, there was some shenanigans, and it ended up in a very different manner. But I am so pleased about the positive aspects and elements of this particular motion, and I stand to support this totally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, I know we have sometimes difference of opinion on individual policy, but I think everybody here would like to see less plastic waste in the ocean specifically, but less plastic waste everywhere. And I agree. I think this is terrific, and good luck to you, and all the best, and well done. I had also concerns about safety, but it appears that that's been pretty well covered. So, look, I wouldn't be volunteering to jump on that myself. So, that's a lot of bravery to do that. Look, I think I do agree with Councillor Harvey. I think we were all on a bit of a unity ticket here tonight, which is great. I think this can draw attention to the plastics issue, and myself in my, you get home and you're lounging around, and as people want to do, you start browsing through documentaries on YouTube, and you see some of the stuff that people are doing with plastic waste and recycling plastic waste. And this might not be the most high-tech way of doing that, but I think it does draw attention to some of the ways that, especially hard plastics, can be reused. I've seen them put forward as pavers and put forward in high-tech applications for roads and all sorts of things. And I think Councillor Harvey's spoken about that in council on a few occasions. He probably knows far more about it than I do. But as has been mentioned, this is something that's likely to get a fair bit of coverage, and it can show that we're supporting not just a worthy venture, but something that can draw attention to some of the innovative ways that we can go about solving the issue of plastic waste.
Further discussion? I think everybody's spoken, haven't they? Look, I commend the project as well. Congratulations, and Godspeed, or whatever sailors say. It is great to highlight the problems that we face with marine waste in particular, but it doesn't look like it's just marine waste. But our fish farms, our oyster farms, are really contributing significantly to that unwanted washed up debris that occurs and floats out to sea. So it's not only we know that it's plastic pollution, and particularly going into our marine environments is very, very problematic. So it's not just something that happens elsewhere. We know that it happens in Tasmania. So to see this highlighted, I think, is a wonderful thing, and I wish you all the best. Alderman Briscoe, thank you very much for bringing this to council. I do feel that the motion could be tighter with actual reference. I know that we have it in the rationale or the information behind us in relation to that safety, but I mean, I think it would be stronger if we actually did incorporate that into the motion. And also that the thing that Alderman Thomas raised in relation to what happens with the grants and the impact on other grants, and suggesting that the proponent does put this forward or applies for grants. I'd still sooner see that in the motion, but as it is, I do support it, and thank you for bringing it to council, and thank you for your tenacity and adventurous spirit.
Can I sum up?
Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, look, thank you for those kind words. We've had a fairly fractious council over the last 4 years, and I thought very carefully about this motion. I thought this would be a nice motion before we enter into the caretaker mode, and I think most people agreed that there's a bit of a unity ticket tonight. It doesn't matter what parties you belong to or don't belong to. We all have concerns about the marine environment. We're a maritime state, and a voyage like this brings out the excitement in people, and I'm sure it will be followed very closely. A documentary and probably live feed as well. I am confident of the skills of Sam. I'm confident after discussions with him that he's covered off the safety aspects, and he's
About the skills of Alderman Harvey. You didn't mention that.
He may not be on council when the voyage starts, so it's probably not a good thing to suggest. Or he might be. Let's hope he is. Let's hope he is. I didn't mean to have a throwaway line there. He encouraged me. So the safety, and I know Sam has talked to MAST, so I think the things to do with MAST will be ticked off, I'm sure. And as the rationale does describe, the ABC have already made one report, I think it was a 7:30 report, and they'll be pretty keenly following this as well. So I'm glad that we have a unity motion to finish off the night, and also that we won't be making any decisions like this during the caretaker mode, so it is a good... I feel proud that even if I'm not around the table, I feel proud that my last motion, is one that brings people together.
Thank you. So I'll put that motion of Alderman Briscoe's. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. Thank you.
I'll come and bring the bubbly when you go, Bill.
6 zeros and I'll go.
3 zeros.
No chance.
Alderman Zuko.
Oh, you don't know how much is in front of the 3 zeros.
Zuko.
Sorry, yes, yes. Finance and Governance, annual plan, final report. It's in accordance with the committee, the Governance, Finance and Governance Committee. Can we please ensure that as part of that annual plan, that someone gets up and puts some power onto our clock? It's gone dead.
Oh no, it's for, yeah.
No, it's for a reason.
What's the reason? Sorry.
It's the ding 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 ding.
Have you heard the squeaking and the
That was
bringing?
it, was it?
Oh, was that it?
Well, it has, I haven't heard it.
Okay, it's the ding ding. Okay, we're going to stop the ding ding. So as part of the annual plan, can you please stop the ding ding on the clock? So I so move.
Thank you. Further discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 15, revised City of Hobart Code for tenders and contracts.
Yes, Chair, as you've moved, basically we're giving the authority to our CEO, so we're trusting her with a lot more of spending more of our money. So move.
Further discussion? No discussion. Put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 16, customer service complaints and compliments report. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, look, this is in accordance to section. Sorry, anyone second it?
Alderman Thomas.
Section 339 of the Local Government Act. You know, we've got a report in regards to our complaints and compliments. Mind you, I'm hoping that our new CEO, I've actually personally spoken to her about our customer service charter, and I just hope that we move forward and hopefully we get more compliments and complaints in the future. Thank you.
Discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 18 is our supplementary item, and it's the end of term report. You'd like to move that, Alderman Zuko?
I'll move the end of term report. Chair, when I was reading this, I sort of went end of term report. It feels like I'm back at school, but anyway, we've got to get it. See, that's good.
Was it a good one?
Yeah, you didn't get as good marks as this though.
Yeah. Did you get good marks?
Look, Look, it's a very good report, and I move it to council, and let's hope that the next councillor comes in gets a very good report as well.
Thank you. Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and I'd commend this as well. I just ask the one question. Some of these dates in that initial report, 2018, which is what I thought would be the relevant one, given that we talk about this term, and some of them are 2016. And I might know the answer to this question already, but why do those dates not necessarily line up? And we're not sort of comparing like for like. We've got 2018 and 2016, and
CEO.
Through you, I'd need the specifics and probably check with the staff just in regards to those elements.
Page 6 of the report.
Up top, medium age.
Where it's medium age, I think I was about to say. I think the reason might be. I just want to confirm.
And I think for the period
census,
that the data was collected on the
Thank you.
census. Thank you. Yeah.
Just checking. I thought I didn't think I knew the answer.
Alderman Briscoe.
Probably the only one that still writes reports for school kids. I'd say well done for the CEO putting this together with her officers. So well done. It looks good. And I'd probably give the council probably not the highest rating, but at least on paper there are some achievements that look good, and I think that's probably and I think we've got the data now. So when we get the next 4-year report, we can compare. A lot of the projects though have dated, whilst they were completed during this 4-year term, they dated prior to it. And I look at the achievements of major projects, and I see every one of those came from a previous council. They initiated it, they got the grants, it got delivered in the 4 years. What I don't see is what have we commenced in terms of major projects. Now, I know there's a list here of things that the council have done, and most of them I think are wonderful things. But equally, I can't see what have we initiated for the next 4 years. And perhaps next 4-year report, if I'm around the table, we might have a heading: projects that we instigated but not completed, or are completed in the next few years. So because we all know, and I was thinking of the few projects I've been involved in more intimately, the Rose Garden Bridge or the Bridge of Remembrance. I do remember both those bridges came out of the master plan for the domain master plan, which predates this, and fortunately, in the previous 4 years, this last 4 years, we got the funding for some of them. Some of the Rose Garden Bridge, most of the funds that built that came from the UTAS when we sold Melville Street Car Park, and that was an agreement we had with UTAS, that UTAS wanted that bridge built, and I thought, well, it fits in with our master plan. 2 out of the 5 bridges that were planned for the master plan, at least we are now seeing achievements. Where the other 3 are, we don't know, but are they being planned for? And so all I can say is well done to council for putting the report together. It's a good initiative, but again, I'm saying it's not a top mark. I don't believe it's a top mark because we haven't put in place things that we're going to do for the next few years.
Further discussion, Councillor Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, look, I think, deferring to my teacher colleague next to me, I think it is a good report. It is difficult to freeze things in a 4-year period because things have commenced. I was just going to ask a question. The community vision, the community panel, when did that actually finish, the panel itself, the report? I thought that was in the very dying embers of the last council. Was it the start of this one?
Again, Deputy Lord Mayor, I'd need to take that sort of officially on notice, but I guess it wouldn't be in here if it hadn't had that period in 2018.
I am pretty sure that community vision
Happy to take it on notice.
Was actually done in the last one.
I think we finished.
So that really is a bit. It definitely looks, that page, community vision panel, strategies and plans endorsed. That particular section, I think, does belong to the previous council.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll be really brief. I did want to say thank you very much for this report, this end of term report, although I don't write reports anymore either, even though I was a teacher. So well done, Alderman Briscoe, for still writing reports.
I'm glad you took it away.
I do really like all of the different things that we have done and that we have been a part of, the strategies and plans that we've endorsed. Also civic involvement, community, the environment and sustainability I think are really great. And I think one thing we should really also highlight for me is the amount of awards that this council has received during our term here. And that's a really stellar number right there of various different awards, and they range from things to do with improving planning processes, the Legacy Park to do with national landscape. There's also different programs to do with how we dealt with resilience in our community after the floods, the parks and leisure, Smarter Hobart. It's such a wonderful reflection of what our staff, and I'm so proud of our staff and all of the work that the officers do, because they've done an outstanding job as well. Thank you.
Just by way of clarification, it was Lord Mayor Christie in relation to community vision. Wasn't this council at all?
Right, thank you. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I appreciate the report. I think it is very valuable. It is very positive. And even though we do note and acknowledge that some of the projects were from the past, and you can't clearly demarcate it because they will have an overflow. Some of the things that we will approve, we may not be part of it, but it'll come later. That's the nature of the term in office for ourselves. But I think there have been some very good, even building approvals when you look at the facts there. And for me, I think COVID for nearly 2 years has been a damper. And I think when you take that into account, really this council and this particular council's term has never been the same in comparison to any other. So I think the staff, and in regards to supporting small businesses, where most of the time and effort went, was very, very commendable. And I think the staff have done a great job. I think we have tried, and we all have good intentions to do things for the community. And so this is a fantastic report. And I think it is very, very positive. And now we can, in fact, show people some of the things that we have done, because sometimes there are comments made that this council is not doing well and there is division. I don't think there is division. There is division when it comes to ideas. We debate it, and robust debate is good. And it is always wise to make recommendations. And for this is a very good report, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And look, I'll commend this report as well. I think it highlights very well the 4 years that we've had. Just while we're on the topic, just while we're using the analogy of school reports on this, I think it would have been great if an big A plus, or I think it would have been good if we included in some way, and I'm just offering this as a reflection, not moving any amendments or anything like that, but if we had included the survey that was commissioned a few months ago by the CEO that outlined how the community and how the business community thought council was performing in its service delivery. Going through that, I actually thought that council performed surprisingly well in the majority of those metrics, especially those organisational ones. But I think if we're talking about a report, and especially in the format, in the context of a school report, we need to be able to reflect on those areas where we can improve, and specifically on the areas where the community thinks that we need to improve. Those that were highlighted being the same for both business community and the broader community being planning, congestion and parking, with parking I think being the largest issue. That's not to say that we should be hypercritical, but we do need to reflect on those areas where we can improve so we can better deliver those services to the people of Hobart. But by and large, I think this report's great, and well done to the staff that have worked on it, and well done to the CEO.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, I'm really pleased to see this summary, and I think this demonstrates that the last 4 years has been hugely successful for this council, that we've delivered across a range of areas, and I think we should be proud of our achievements over this 4 years. We will have a different council next time round, and the challenge is, can they deliver as much as we have in this term? I'd also like to highlight some things that I'm very proud of, and that's the delivery of the plastics bylaw, and I really commend the officers and the work they put into that. Huge body of work to be able to lead the country in that space. And also the climate and biodiversity emergency, again, first city in the country to declare a climate emergency, and just some other things that I've been really fortunate to be part of, and that's being the council rep at COP26 in Katowice, Poland, and to be able to represent the council at the National Climate Roundtables, which was a subnational group of both councils and state bodies with all the climate ministers from around the country. And the final one was to be able to go to the Plastic Summit in Canberra, where only a couple of local government representatives were invited, and I was pleased to be invited to that, as well as the APCO meetings. I attended 3 of those around the country, where we looked at the national approach to plastics, and from that came the national government's approach to how they were going to deal with single-use plastics going forward up to 2025, where 100% of single-use plastics needed to be recyclable, compostable or reusable, which they kind of already were. But anyway, that target is on track. Well, it's not really, but some of those targets we're heading towards those targets nationally. But Hobart can be proud that it's helped push things along with regard to states looking at single-use plastic regulation as well. So we can all be proud of what we've achieved on council with regard to the list, but also individually we've also had huge input into leading the City of Hobart in, I think, a good direction and achieving some national firsts.
Suko, did you want to say something else?
I just want to sum up the debate. So.
Does anybody else want to say anything? Right, okay. So, look, I'd like to thank the CEO, the directors and the current staff in relation to providing this snapshot, but also to the former GM, Nick Heath, and directors and former staff who have contributed, who are the backbone of this council. It is up to us as elected members to support their work and also to see those vital things that we have and want delivered for our community. So very pleased to see this snapshot in front of us. So over that time, and Alderman Barakis did point out that it's not necessarily all from 2016 to 2021, but over that time we've seen a population increase of 2.7%. We're becoming younger, so we've got a median age of 37 years now, and we have a more diverse population with 10%, an increase of 10% born overseas. So that's 32.7% of the Hobart community is born overseas. We've got an increased gross regional product now in 2021, which was $8.3 billion, which is up 14.6%, and a consistent value of planning approvals around the $305 million in 2021. So all of those things are just a snapshot of how our city is heading. So there have been many achievements which have already been listed, but I'd like to just list a few. The precinct upgrade at Lena Valley, which was completed, and the other stages for the Newtown precinct upgrade. We had the building of the Rose Garden Bridge, which was finally signed off, and also the ferries. So we had the new pilot, which was supported by the federal or the state government under the Greater Hobart or the Hobart deal, And we now see that that's going to be more of a permanent service. So I think it's commendable to think that we've had input as a council and been leading a lot of that work. We've also supported major events such as Dark Mofo and also said goodbye to delivering the taste. So quite significant changes over that time. And importantly, and Councillor Dutta touched on this, the COVID response for our city was really guiding our community through a lot of that. We left parks open during that time, but we had rent relief in council buildings for our tenants, and we had hardship provisions for rates, and I commend the work of Ms McDonnell and her team. And also we had rates postponements if that was called upon, and a directory of online services, which was really critical when businesses were pivoting at that stage. One of the important responses to climate change has been the emergency mitigation and response, and we know that our bushland teams do amazing work, and Mr John Fisher has been heading a lot of that work as well. So we've seen many challenges in this 4-year period, and we've responded to them. But also we've seen the opportunities, and we continue to develop and grow in relation to what we need. And as Alderman Briscoe has pointed out, it's not a perfect score, but there's always work to be done. But I do commend this snapshot, and really pleased to see the snapshot before us. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, there's been a lot of talk about, it's part of the previous council, which is actually, it's not just part of the previous, it's part of the evolution of council as well, because over a number of years the council has been pushing, different councils have been pushing for reduction in costs and operating costs of this council. Chair, I actually am going to score this. I'm going to score this at 9.999. And the reason why I've deducted a point is because when you're trying to read the report, the lettering is a little bit too small for some people that have got glasses, and I've had to squint a lot, and I think we're all in that same position. And if I ask the next year's report, can we have a slightly bigger font? I think it's down to about 0.8. I think if we can get about 11 or 12, it might be better. I thought I'd just mention that. But look, I understand we can all jump and pat each other on the back. At the end of the day, there's only components that this council does. If it wasn't for our previous administration and past administration, and even our current administration, we wouldn't go anywhere. So I think I'm sorry, but we as elected members can pat ourselves as much as we want. We're only as good as the advice that we're given, and I've got to say that is very important to me and always has been. But I read the statistics the deputy has mentioned, but there are a couple of statistics here that I think we as a council need to go forward on and see what we can do to work on this. I think we've started the ball rolling with the homeless group. But we've got the medium house for income's gone up dramatically. The mortgage payments for median housing has gone up dramatically. I know we aren't directly involved in there, but it's in this report. And also the rentals have gone up dramatically. So there are probably things that we can do, and we can do better. And I understand that there's been mention about there's a lot of approvals, but if we had a lot more approvals, maybe some of that might assist. So I commend the report. I thank the staff, and Chair, I actually thank you for your chairing this evening. It's been sensational, because we're going to go in the close next. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's no further discussion. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. We now move into close. Alderman Zuko, I'll ask you to move that. Seconded by Alderman Barakis. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. And I thank those who've been here tonight, and also those who've been listening.